Hi, everybody. My name is Vera Levitt. I'm a gallery director here at UMass Dartmouth. And I'd like to welcome you here at our virtual artist talks for the MFA Thesis Exhibition in 2021. I'm really excited to have you here and share what's behind the scenes with you and listen to our talented students. Just a few housekeeping notes. Today, we ask you all to be muted unless you talk. We'll have 5 minutes for each student's presentations that will be followed by 3 minutes questions and answers. If you have questions, please put them into the chat and we'll read them for you. I'd like to introduce Spencer Thomas Ladd, who is our graduate director, who will moderate the presentations. We have Lawrence Jenkins here, who is our dean at CVPA, and also Jim Lawton, who will help us moderate the discussion. Also, I would like to thank Rosie Amato, who is here with us. She's the gallery assistant who will be doing the secret background checks for people coming in, and also sharing the materials or slideshows of our students. So I'm really glad to have you all here. We'll have Lawrence talking later, and once we have the visiting artist here, she'll have a few notes, welcoming notes, and then we'll have presentations, and afterwards we'll have faculty congratulating the students at the end. We expect this to go between 7 to close to 9 tonight. Thank you so much, and hope you'll enjoy the evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lawrence Jenkins. I am the dean here in the College of Visual and Performing Arts. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this opening for the 2021 MFA Thesis Exhibition. I am thrilled to be here at the Star Store and in the gallery. I hope that all of you who haven't will take advantage of the ability to come see the show. Before we start this evening, I wanted to thank a number of people who are involved. First of all, the exhibiting artists, because this is the culmination of 2 or 3 years of really hard work. It's always fun to see the struggles and the issues that you've worked through come together in such a resolved way in the MFA exhibition. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you to Spencer Ladd for his guidance of the graduate program, and Thomas Stubblefield before him. All of the faculty who are involved have obviously led, guided, and enriched the experience that our students have had here. Vera Levitt has, as always, put together an extraordinary exhibition in trying times. Thank you, Vera. Michelle Bowers, thank you for the terrific catalog design, which is available virtually on the gallery website, and to Paula Ehrenberg Medeiros for your work in putting the exhibition online. All of you have contributed to making an extraordinary event possible for us.
Hi, I'm the interim MFA program coordinator. So up first, we have Ryan Cooley.
We all carry the marks of our trauma going forward, and I'm using vessels as a metaphor to convey visually what we often experience. Trauma takes different forms, and each individual has their own subjective version of even the same experience. As we move through life, we interact with other people and experience events. And when these experiences and interactions require us to change shape or to adapt, when they push us outside of our comfort zone and we are forced to bend and flex because of circumstances or other people, that leaves marks. To illustrate this point, Someone who has been in a car accident may have physical injuries that can take weeks, months, or even years to heal. But in addition, they usually have some sort of post-traumatic stress. They may never feel safe driving a car again and may need counseling or therapy to return to a level of baseline functionality. To adjust the metaphor a little bit, most of our relationships are a form of socio-emotional bumper cars. The interactions we have with other people shape our world view, our view of them, and also our views of ourselves. These interactions can be jarring or uncomfortable, and sometimes they leave us injured in the form of negative self-image or in our desire to trust others. The creation of the vessels themselves was a form of inactive metaphor. Pieces were conceptualized, designed, manufactured, and then subjected to stresses of a variety of sorts. Then, after having been distorted by these external forces, their shape was solidified, and then the process was continued. Burnout was the first work that I was able to complete after the beginning of the lockdown due to a global pandemic. The process of creating the vessels involved putting them into a literal fire to burn out the interior support structure that the copper was originally plated onto. This removed the solidity and the strength of the piece from the inside out, revealing brittleness and gaps that otherwise would have been merely cosmetic. They become, instead, structural weakness. They straddle the line between light and shadow in a place that is neither one nor the other, and staring into that shadow carries the feeling of being uncertain of your surroundings and your place in them. The pieces that make up the Discarded series are finished with a coat of molten glass, clothing them in colors and textures usually reserved for high-end artwork. Their form, however, is that of a crushed plastic cup that has served its purpose and is then discarded. They are displayed piled in the corner of a larger bin, illustrating the cycle of being used and then discarded. Following the Leader was the first series in which I used the pieces to shape each other. 3D printed vessels were placed into boiling water, and then they were pressed together, each one forced to change shape according to what was around it. Once each piece had been shaped by its fellows, they were plated and their interiors burnt out, removing their original self. They were given a uniform coat of blank matte white, and once all of the superficial aspects had been made the same, they went through the fire together. Each piece is still unique, but they are no longer individual. They huddle together at the edge of a precipice, each one following the next down the line. Getting ahead is a visualization of the stacking stratification that happens when people stand on others in order to get ahead. This happens both socially and in the workplace. Nowhere in my life was this more visible than in the military, where the saying goes, excrement rolls downhill. Responsibilities and requirements are heaped upon the junior levels as those above them take credit for accomplishments. Blame, culpability, and guilt, that is the tar you see flowing down from the top, pooling in the hollows of the vessels lower down. We carry the marks of our traumas with us in a variety of forms. My vessels are an effort to embody my own experiences in a way that is both individual and widely relatable to what we experience as we go through life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ryan. That was wonderful. I have a kickoff question for you, and that has to do with as viewers come into the gallery, how you are manipulating or conveying content by how you are positioning them in the space.
Excellent question. So let's talk a little bit about the burnout piece here in the upper left. That piece was incomplete until I set up a scenario in which you have to look into this space that's a sort of a shadow space. Because these pieces were originally made by throwing them in the fire, and when each piece was removed from the fire, it was basically surfacing from ashes. Like I mentioned, enacted metaphor, that's how it felt coming back to try to be creative after so long just trying to get by and trying to expend discretionary effort in a way that was not merely putting out small fires, if you will, left its mark. So my manipulation of the space forces people to look down into the drawer where these pieces have been discarded, like a waste bin, and to look up. This is actually displayed about 8 feet up the wall. And you don't really get the scale from this picture, but these lean out over the edge. And as you look up, you can see that they're precariously balanced.
I'd like to follow up with a question too. Ryan, first of all, you have a voice that's terrific and you read beautifully. You should become a professional reader.
Thank you.
End of imagination, hollowed out, numb, neutral, and apathetic. It's very negative things for a result of trauma. But you seem to have alluded to this a little bit. How did you overcome that negative place, that empty place, sort of the end of your imagination, and create work again?
So according to psychological journals, you can't treat trauma until you're done with it. Like you can handle individual episodes, but you can't really dig into an event until the experience has passed. It has to be retrospective, which is why each of these pieces, each of these series handles everything a little bit different, because each of them speaks to a different type of trauma. Getting ahead stems from, or has as its root, my experiences in the military, where sometimes I felt like I was, cup number 3 up here, but most of the time I felt like I was cup number 1 or number 2, catching whatever came down the hill as far as responsibility or blame. I think in order to overcome the negativity, so like these pieces, you can see this is hollow, but that hollowness and that space actually creates an openness where you can feel the transparency, you can feel the vulnerability and the lack of closure. So I don't think I have overcome the negative sides of the trauma so much as paired them with the polishing that can come as we heal and regrow, or the reshaping and the preservation that can come as we rebuild, because that hollowness and that damage is integral to the pieces themselves. And sometimes that never goes away.
Absolutely. Well, our time's up. That was a great presentation. And I'd love to talk to you more about this, but we're going to go on to Paulina now.
Good night. From Out of Pain, Beauty. This quote is from Irving Stone, Lust for Life book. It's a biographical novelization of the life of Vincent van Gogh. This painter is an inspiration for my work, especially the way that he confronts his suffering. I work with handmade felt. What is this? It's a textile material where wool fiber hood together and create a single piece of fabric. The combination of heat, humidity, and continuous friction is what turns wool into felt. In my pieces, this anxious technique from form volume in which the viewer can recognize element and connection with the human being. I explore the mystery of suffering and how in that moment of vulnerability we come together. My art is a scream of pain to get your attention, like the pieces Chile, not to forget them. It addressed injustice and human rights violation during the 17 years of the dictatorship in my country home, the period in which I was raised. It shows what human being is able to do against another human being. Okay. It shows what, in some of my pieces with irregular and porous texture of felt, I represent the skin of our body, the physical border of our interior world. Also, felt can convey the idea of relief through the sense of being wrapped, warm, protect, and cuddle. Because is in our body, we experience physical, mental, and spiritual pain. This sensation of pain originated from our close reality. How when my mother passed away in spring 2020, a deep feeling of helplessness invaded me and originated my pieces, the core of life. Contemplating and seeking to capture my memories of her, I realized that the mark that I carry of my ballet from my umbilical cord is the sign that I'm connected with her. Through textile and handmade felt, I create pieces and installations that reflect this experience of suffering and the resultant fragility. My artwork, I'm losing consciousness, is a reflect of this fragility. On a long pieces of felt, my mother's handwriting seems to peel off the paper, represented her loss of consciousness while she was sick. With this big black bag of felt, paquete negro, charging suffering, regardless of language, race, of cultural, I intend to show the viewer how humans are connected and how we can relate to each other through our individual and collective pain. Art becomes the dimension in which I can transform grief into hope, fear into opportunity, and ugliness into beauty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paulina. I have a kickoff question, and that has to do with the use of text in your work, both in Spanish and English,
Okay.
and how that is a conveyor of meaning or how you use it in your
Okay.
work.
Okay, well, it's important to know that my background is journalist. I studied journalism in my country and worked for a period. And for me, writing is the extension of our interior world. I usually use it when I was very young to writing about my feeling and about my concern about the world, and also with the circumstances that I lived. For me, it's important to reflect the person, the interior world of the person.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
And everyone, please write something in the chat so I can read it out loud. When I look at your work and you talk about skin,
Uh-huh.
I think of goosebumps, and I think of sweat, and I think of a barrier between the interior and the exterior.
Yes.
And you know, the skin and the heart, they react very quickly to not only what's on the exterior, I mean, extremely sensitive, how the skin works on the exterior, but I think the skin and the heart also react extremely quickly to emotions on the interior of our soul, our body. And that seems to come through in your work. I guess it's more of a statement than a question. And I find that very compelling.
Yes, I think the pieces that I did, oh, sorry, that's happened something with the.
Paulina, Rosie has a question regarding, she wonders, how does living in the US in the past few years help you see Chilean culture and history through another lens?
Okay, well, that's happened when you change of country. You in some way disconnect with your home country and the root that you bring, and you create a new way to see the world and a new environment. I see now my country in a different way, especially when I rise. It was very close. We don't have a lot of liberty of expression. And now it's a very, there are a lot of chaos with coronavirus and the social movement, political social movement that we are living now. And for me, it's a very small country, small people live inside this land. And we are very shared person, and my country now, that's the feeling that is part of my skin too.
Excellent.
So we have maybe we'll take last question, and then María Magdalena Campos-Pons is here. So Lawrence will introduce her. Does anybody want to do the last question before we move on?
Thank you, Paulina. I think this is wonderful. The questions, I think, covered a lot of different dimensions. Again, we want to encourage everybody to come in person and to the gallery and get your tickets. It's well worth the effort to come out to New Bedford. Thank you, Paulina.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Don't go anywhere.
Thank you, Brian and Paulina, for really engaging conversations about your work. It is now my pleasure to introduce this evening's guest artist and visiting, I guess, critic, if that's the right term. María Magdalena Campos-Pons was born in Cuba, raised there on a sugar plantation, educated there, and lived until 1991 in Cuba, when she emigrated to the United States and to Boston. In the late 1980s, she taught at the prestigious Instituto Superior del Arte in Havana, and gained an international reputation as an exponent of the new Cuban art movement that arose in opposition to the communist repression on the island. Campos-Pons has had solo exhibitions at important museums around the world, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Indianapolis Museum of Art, the Peabody Essex Museum, the National Gallery of Canada, amongst many others. You may remember her best from her installation, 1919 Molasses Interval, in the University Gallery here at UMass Dartmouth in 2019. She was part of Rebecca Uchel's extraordinary Local Ecologies exhibition. So María Magdalena, we are happy to welcome you back. I'll just finish by saying that Campos-Pons' work is in over 30 museum collections, including the Smithsonian and the Whitney, the Art Institute of Chicago, the National Gallery of Canada, the V&A in London, MoMA in New York, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and the Perez Art Museum in Miami. Again, among many others. That's a pretty impressive list of museums. In 2004, Campos-Pons founded the Boston art space GASP, a gallery that encourages artistic exchanges and collaborations in order to understand the contemporary cultural landscape. In 2017, our visiting artist was given the, sorry, I've lost my place. In any case, she is now a distinguished professor at Vanderbilt University in in Nashville, Tennessee, where she's been since 2007. She, in 2017, received a doctor honoris causa from that institution. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here with us on this night that is so incredibly important to our graduate students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, for your words of introduction, and thank you all, the professors in the program and the students in the program that has invited me, Viera, all of the people that have been connecting me to this program today. My apologies, I was giving a speech at Columbia NYU joint program this evening, and it went a little over time, so my apologies to arrive a bit late. I am delighted to be part of this conversation tonight with you guys. So this is my piece at the Guggenheim in 2014, and this is a still of the piece. I wanted to show you this particular piece because it's in 2014 was the very first year that the Guggenheim, with its long history, invited a woman of African descent to have a solo show. Not only that it is a little bit of a commentary in the reading or not necessarily bringing center attention to women in general. There are a few women that have been exhibited at the Guggenheim, but this was the very first time that a woman of African American descent was invited. The main artist for the show was artist Carrie Mae Weems, that I suppose that you guys are all very familiar with her work. And she extended an invitation at the same time to a few other artists to create a piece. I create this piece is called Habla la Madre. The mother is talking, or the mother speak. And what I was trying to talk was my own observation and my own understanding of Frank Lloyd Wright's relation with water, with the symbolism of water. As a young student of art in Cuba, I remember how fascinating and how emotional and charged was to study Frank Lloyd Wright, and specifically his famous house, the house in the waterfall. No, so when I came to America and find out that water was a symbol, was centerpiece in the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, not only the house of the Cascade, the house in the waterfall, who become very an icon of his making, but also at the Guggenheim. The first time that I was in the Guggenheim, I saw the little fountain in the shape of an eye, a shape that is, for me, is very important, but most of the time, the fountain is empty. So this small reservoir of water that Frank Lloyd Wright put in there, I suppose with all his sensibility about elements and balance and relation with scenes in the world, was most of the time dry. So I make a point not only to come to the Guggenheim, but to activate that fountain, and also activate the feeling of a spiral, centrifugal force, and tornado, hurricane, all of those things that are connected with water instability and water forces. A tornado is water that is condensed, and an hurricane, the same thing. So I was thinking, this is such a beautiful metaphor, and I claim that Frank Lloyd Wright was too a son of the goddess of the water, Yemayab. So this whole piece is about that. So I saw that could be an important piece to share with you guys, and to start in a way my conversation. You guys know I have almost 40 years of work. It could take, we could see different presentation for a long, but I think that this one it's valuable for what I want to communicate to you all. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Magda. It made me so want to go to Guggenheim. Like I haven't been there forever. It's like it almost hurts like to see all the people. Like I have such yearning for the previous 2020 January life. So thank you for sharing that with us, and we'll continue the evening with the next presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next presenter is Taylor Hickey. Taylor, you're up.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Taylor Hickey, and I'm an MFA candidate in printmaking. My work is interdisciplinary, but it's still based in and begins with printmaking. It's a very process-oriented medium and allows for the reproduction of images in a way that's still very artistic and hands-on and unique. And it tends to be a bit more accessible than one-off artworks, but it still has a handmade quality that you can still see and feel the artist's touch in every print. The development of my current work began while I was an undergrad at McNeese State University in Louisiana. That's where I first discovered printmaking and bookmaking, and then in a workshop, I learned to make these three-dimensional polyhedra from paper. I really enjoyed it, and it was perfect for taking prints that I wasn't completely happy with and cutting them up and gluing them together again and transforming them into something that I was happy, and the process was really fun for me too. And I quickly got fixated on making these forms. I featured several in my senior thesis work, which was about the nature of satellites and the literal and metaphorical concept of gravity keeping a body in perpetual orbit around something else. My interest in astronomy, both in general and as the subject of my art, developed really organically around this point. It was never something I tried to force, but it's something I keep feeling drawn back to. And I find this type of work to be the most meaningful and satisfying for me. I think because there's just so much out there that we've come to understand in a relatively short time, and even still more that we don't understand about the universe. It's mysterious and compelling and brings out all these existential questions within us as human beings about our lives and our place in the grand scheme of things. In the last 3 years since I've been here, I've tried to find a balance between the physical, technical aspects of making artwork and understanding and articulating the intellectual or emotional concepts that drive me to create. It's a struggle at times, but I feel like I'm making progress as an artist, and I just hope to continue that and keep experimenting and keep learning. Tried some new printmaking techniques here and some new imagery and styles with the techniques that I was already familiar with. And although a lot of my work is three-dimensional now, I still very much enjoy the print in itself as a work of art. But I do make some prints with the intention that they may be made into other art objects, specifically these repetitive geometric forms. I think they're really interesting because you can take one folded shape and multiply it, repeat it, and essentially tile 3 dimensions instead of tiling 2 dimensions. And this is relevant conceptually because I've been very inspired recently by the writing of Jan Levin, a theoretical physicist and contemporary author. And she wrote a book called How the Universe Got Its Spots, which I found extremely interesting and inspirational. It's written in a very poetic stream of consciousness kind of way. And in it, she talks about her thought experiments regarding the shape of our universe, whether it's finite or infinite, and how we might be able to find out in the not so distant future. She theorizes that the universe may even be a polyhedron. And if so, we might be able to confirm this by discovering a pattern in the cosmic microwave background, the faint radiation that fills all of space-time, a relic of the Big Bang. And I found that so beautiful and meaningful and exciting. Whether it turns out to be true or not, it's a beautiful thought. And as Levin pointed out in an interview, maybe it's a bit cliche for artists or writers to say that they're motivated by beauty, but scientists always seem to get away with it. Buckminster Fuller said something similar too. He said, when I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty, but when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it is wrong. So I'm very inspired in making this work by the pursuit of knowledge and truth and the beauty of that endeavor. I started including elements of light and installation in my MFA work to really push it further and try to pique the curiosity and wonder of viewers and create a contemplative experience for them to reflect on their own place in the cosmos.
Thank you, Taylor. That was a great presentation. We have a question from Laura Henderson. Have you ever made repeating patterns like wallpaper? It seems like it might work well for your imagery and also make really immersive spaces.
Yeah, thank you. I love that idea, and it's something that I have played with a little bit. I have made like a large scale wall piece that was, just flat and 2-dimensional, but I've also started making some that are tiled. So they're like kind of 3-dimensional, but they're meant to be wall pieces, and they are like tiled on the wall. And I would love to do that on a bigger scale and make like an immersive, like a room full of it, wrapped in it. But just for the sake of time and funds, I wasn't able to get to that with the MFA work, but it is still something that's very much on my mind.
Taylor, you have served your grad community almost your entire time here as president of Gallery 244. And you've seen many shows there, and you've had quite a few shows. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about light. In traditional gallery settings, light is used to illuminate the work. Talk about how light informs your work conceptually, or the lack thereof.
I think, I don't know if this necessarily applies to my work, but I feel like I've often heard light as a metaphor for like some grand truth or like some grand knowledge. They say like something was illuminated or someone was enlightened. And so, I think there is that kind of association. But for me, I have always liked that nocturnal sense of light, where, things are maybe not so bright, but it just makes the small things that are bright seem that much brighter, if that makes sense.
Could I follow within that idea in a way? And thank you for your presentation, Taylor. I have two questions. To what extent Buckminster Fuller has been an inspiration, and into one extent you have taken, whatever approximation you could have to his problematization of space and form. And the second part of that question is, have you considered an speculation of form that allowed you to break down to sort of a pre-existing or pre-condition of a structuring that is attached to that tradition of Bauhaus? And I'm going to go quickly and say, with computer language, for instance, as a speculation of form, we have the opportunity to really enter in a space of imagination of form that is really by algorithm, that a specific program, a specific manipulation of a space allow for flexibility and angularities and things that otherwise we don't see in traditional rendering. If that interests you, or if that is something that you have even given a consideration. And second, and this, don't take this as a harsh observation, but I want to be sure that in this beautiful title, the cosmological sublime, you take into account the implication of sublime and in the history of visuality, the kind of a speculation of a space, landscape, immensity, dimension, a scale, complexity of observing and perceiving, because the sublime asks us for contemplation, require for us observation that it means contemplation. It is not there, then it's not sublime per se. So this for me are that I want to be sure that as you move forward in the progression of your project, you don't let familiarity trap you or even simplicity. What would be if one of these forms become soft edges, every one of them? So instead of being hard edges, who was Buckminster and to some extent Barhouse, become soft edge as the cosmos. We don't know all things that are in the cosmos, but what we know is a lot of roundness, softness, stretching, flexible. No, we have a sense. I am talking too much now. I think that my question become an entire comment, but I think that this is important. Flexibility of the form. What happened since that last piece that you show a stretch, maybe managing to speak about materiality that is not paper, but is made with paper.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions and your thoughts. I would love to talk with you more about this tomorrow as well. And I do really like your point about the sublime, because it is something that that I've been reading on, and it's not something that I took lightly in using that word in the name, because I know that the sublime is supposed to be overwhelming and like you said, contemplative, and it's supposed to really make us realize the boundaries of our own understanding and you know, just realize like our own smallness and that there's so much beyond us.
I want to bring you to another question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the work of Villa Selmins?
Elena Petova, one of our professors, did introduce me to the work of Villa Selmins. Yeah.
Because the only reason that I want to mention to you is to say, and it could be miniature, and the sense, the perception of that sublime could be in miniature. We don't talk about a scale. It could be achieved in a very small scene as well.
That makes me think a bit of Joseph Cornell, who I'm also very inspired by.
What sublime
picture.
You know, we have a whole session tomorrow that's longer, and we have a lot of people.
Yeah.
I've got to be the kind of rude person to interject.
No worries.
So on to Shabnam now. So Shabnam, there were other questions in the chat. I'll have to send them to you. Shabnam, can you present next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shabnam Janasari, and I am an MFA candidate in painting. I am an Iranian artist born and raised in Isfahan, Iran. I have chosen a rather uncommon life path for an Iranian woman, coming from a traditional family. In my family, art was and still is considered a hobby. Yet despite the fact I was never encouraged to study art as my primary academic focus, I was the only woman in my family to make the bold choice to leave my conservative hometown and move to the United States by myself to study art. Making choice to leave Iran not only allowed me wonderful opportunities in my education and professional career, but also showed me how truly rewarding perseverance can be. This body of work tells the story of my life, which I left behind in Iran. It illuminates the plight of the Iranian woman censored by an overarching patriarchy and creates a place where they can exist freely out of convention. I combine drawing and painting to explore a nostalgia of distant intimacies in my life, transformed into figures in dreamscapes, and construct images that reveal and empower the complex reality of Iranian female identity. Iranian patriarchal society censors female independence, dictating that women cover their bodies with the hijab and restricting what they can do, where they can go, and what they can express. Nonetheless, many women are conflicted overtly following the rules of their families and society and covertly fighting these limitations by pushing the boundaries and breaking the rules. Gender politics and women's rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran are rooted in historical and sociological contexts in which patriarchy supports Islam and Islam supports patriarchy. The combination of Islam and patriarchal society, both significant parts of Iranian history, amplifies and reinforces women's suppression. To counter this severe censorship, I channel Michel Foucault's notion of heterotopic space and create a space where women can exist freely. Foucault writes, "The traditional garden of the Persians was a sacred space that was supposed to unite four separate parts with its rectangle, representing the four parts of the world, as well as one space still more sacred than others. A space that was like the novel, the center of the world brought into the garden." The versatility of a heterotopic space allows me to construct an ideal world outside of convention, a special and secret space, which exists in stark contrast with Iranian reality. My painting express my personal story and reflect on the life of Iranian and of all suppressed women. I address the complexity of Iranian female identity in the imagined space that departs from reality and creates a special supportive heterotopic representation. Persian carpet serving as a symbol of this ideal world or paradise are depicted in warm, saturated colors and elaborate patterns that conjure my childhood memories. Through the pattern, which act as a bridge between different elements in my paintings, I build a world for my figures that transcend everyday life. I flood domestic rooms with pattern and color, freeing the women from social rules. By reinventing and creating imaginary spaces with my intense palette, I construct an abstract and highly emotive world. The gaze plays a crucial role in my work. It addresses the person's story, how they are transfixed in the moment. I have used the action of gazing back as a means to free the female body from this objectification. The gaze in this context becomes a charged sexuality, which implies empowerment for the objectified female and power. In my paintings, women return the gaze, freeing themselves from centuries of suppression by patriarchal society. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Shilpa. Marie, would you like to have some of the first comments before we go to other questions?
I love it.
Yeah.
I think that is you are navigating an interesting line of juxtaposing personal narrative with understanding of parameters of Western painting, but also introducing a significant identifying of original or whatever we're going to call a point of origin. So I think that I am curious to see how the work develop. Your understanding of monochromatic is very strong, and you play with that with efficiency. So I'm excited to see where it's going, and I particularly saw that the last two pieces of the women with the leggings and the stripes are very, very well resolved. I have a question. See, do you use collage in some of the pieces, or is everything painting, or is collage material in it?
I'm not using collage or any other material except one of my work. I have the object attaching with a magnet on them. Also, for my starting my before I starting my painting, I start my sketch with collage.
Great.
Sabnam,
Yes.
I think I've asked this question of you before, and it has to do with the gaze.
Mhm.
Some of your subjects, and you spoke about them, return the gaze intensely, but others do not. Can you speak to those that do not, and your strategy with those subjects in your painting? That don't return the gaze. They're rare, but they're there.
Could you please tell me which of my work not returning the gaze back?
It's, I believe, your mom and aunt.
Mhm.
There's three in the picture, and I believe one figure is really staring, returning the gaze, but one is looking to the side. Is when the second or third piece. But this is a question maybe for later, but there is a use for not having that gaze come back. And I think it's useful that it's not turned on all the time with all the figures. And I think you've done it, at least in that one painting. And it leaves the viewer like asking who that person is and why their gaze is off to the side.
Actually, gaze plays a crucial and very important part of my work, and I try my best to for my figure to for them to work the gaze work, and I don't know, actually I should think about your work, and that's a great point that you are mentioned that.
I'm sorry. That's going to have to be the last question.
Please.
We're
Thank you, Sabnam.
Yeah, it was a wonderful presentation.
We'll catch up.
Thank you.
I promise.
Thank you, Jem. Sungji, you're next.
Thank you. My works are result of reflecting myself through memories. This journey has started since I moved to the United States. At that time, I feel disconnected from everything in my ordinary life. I was perplexed. I cannot define this mixed feeling, which could be a sort of nostalgia or isolation or emptiness. This experience forces me to hold on to my memories. Memories fade away, but their fragments are fossilized and reside somewhere in my mind. I explore these fragments, and they could be found in various forms, like objects, smells, colors, and emotions. I try to find the meanings from my past, which still affects me. In this process, I could connect and reconcile between my current self and my old memories. And my memories are evolving into a new art form. I use two different mediums, clay and fiber. Clay contains history inside like a fossil, but fiber is soft and flexible that provide mobility. I can embody the duality of memories, motionless and evolving, with these two mediums. Exploring hidden memories is kind of a play for me, as if a little kid plays scavengers hunt or hide and seek. In this process, I simply become a little girl and dwell in my childhood playground. My childhood dolls and teddy bears and places are vague, like illusions. But my perception of this memory is real. In my work, I try to embody these two components by juxtaposing objects and shadows. And when I recall my old memories, I often realize that my memories are somewhat distorted and ambiguous. This is because I lost not only my old memories, but also the way in which I used to perceive the world. I no longer experience and see the world in that way I used to do in my childhood. I realized that forgotten memories reside somewhere in my unconscious mind, whereas their vanished traces are left in my conscious mind. In this work, I try to visualize the contrast of those two different domains. And sometimes I feel memories are out of my control. I cannot remember something I want to keep it, or I cannot erase some moments I don't want to remember at all. Imagine that you are holding the ice cream in your hands. You want to keep it and hold this sweetness forever, but eventually ice cream is melting and slip through your hands, fingers, and all the sticky sugar make your hands and floor messy. In Melting Memories, I try to catch remnants of memories with the tennis balls, but they are broken and falling down and fail to catch everything. This moment is evoking somewhat uncomfortable feelings, but I realized this struggle moment is my life as well, and I eventually find the beauty of forgetting. Thank you.
Nicely done. María Magdalena, can I call you Magda?
Or you could call me Magda. Soon, yes, you could call me Magda, of course.
I'd prefer that. Would you like to make the first sets of comments?
Yes, and I say good presentation, very well structured. And I am very curious, very curious about some of the description that you make about your memory. In this particular piece, the one about the melting memories,
Yeah.
you describe, you just present to us an image of sins dripping through the hands and through the body. And what I want to say about that, I want to invite you to think about what that image mean itself. This particular piece, the yellow one, is beautifully resolved, is very pleasant, is very is well balanced, is all those good things. However, I am so curious about that distorted figure or this distorted material that is slipping away from being held by that figure that you describe, which I see a little bit more of that. I was trying to move your screen like it was mine. In the previous piece with the mirror, you could come back to the previous piece, the one they have the mirror in the floor and is all this. So there is more complexity here. There is a more of this kind of dreaming like metaphysical and at the same time surrealist and at the same time maybe even futurist, because we don't know what is that. So what I would recommend to you is stay with the thing that you don't know. Do what is uncomfortable to me. The yellow piece in some way for me, you have seen it many times and you are very familiar with that. But what you describe, I have never seen and I want to see that. So in here, this one, I see a lot of things that I have not seen before. And I am curious at the whole dynamic of how the drawing merge and in the surface and claim above and reflecting the bottom and become this infinite pool back and forth and pushing and all of that. So this piece for me have a lot of grasp of opportunities undone to me. I want to be sure that I say, I love the yellow piece, but I know the yellow piece. And I want you to give me something that I don't know because it's you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat room from faculty. Okay, thank you.
I have
Okay.
one question for Seung-Ji.
Sure.
I know that, Seung-Ji, you've made a lot of really small scale works, and it seems like you've kind of really spread out into these larger installations. So I wondered if you could just talk about that and how have you kind of changed your way of working throughout your graduate process?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, I usually make the miniature size and that, yeah. But I'm just still into the small size of work, but yeah, but I just, in this piece, I just want some abstract things, the emotions. I want to more focus on my emotional things. So I just create the big size. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go on to Madison now.
All right. Hello. My name is Madison Moreno, and I am a ceramic artist working towards her MFA. Over these past 3 years, I have been conducting research into memory, experience, and relationships within the family home. Being a potter, my first instincts brought me to the table, working with plates, bowls, cups, and more to try to create a language of the diverse layers surrounding a conversation shared over a meal. These layers first developed as surface design and carving, but soon became sculptural, taking some of the image drawn on the pot and building them into physically start absorbing the ware. Eventually, I found that a single pot was only able to tell a portion of the story I was trying to write. In order to convey the layers and density within the home, I found that I needed to create layers and density within the work. This piece is entitled The World Forgetting by the World Forgot and is the size of a standard round dinner table for 5. It is covered with bisque-fired tableware, which were all individually thrown and then misshapen to create organic forms, folds, and dents. The pots are still recognizable forms, but have changed much like memory and time impacts events, conversations, and people. Unlike most dinner tables, this one does not have a top. Rather, it sits within itself, creating a feeling of movement. Something that was very important to me was the idea of time and direction. I wanted to make the pots look like they were falling down and out onto the floor, while at the same time being sucked into the center of the piece so that the table in itself would not be moving in one direction, but in many at once. This correlates with time. I do not see this piece as only showing the impacts of memory, but also how memory impacts the present and how it influences the future. The shape of the table not only allows for easy conversation for the individuals who sit at it, but also reflects life cycles, time loops, and a shape that does not have a beginning or an end. Moving past the table and onto the walls, I wanted to play with how humans display and frame their past. I was particularly drawn towards the idea of old family portraits, something I only saw in movies and museums growing up, but which had a distinct feeling of history and memory. Something that was very intriguing to me was the idea that portraits were commissioned and therefore influenced by the individuals paying for the piece. This means that the images would not only showcase the values and symbols of the family or individual, but could also gloss over any blemishes or ugly pieces that the individual would not want the future to see. Playing with this idea, I wanted to utilize glaze and ornamentation for my wall piece to act as that glossing over of unwanted imagery. This piece consists of 3 wall hangings together and is entitled A Presence of Departed Acts. While I utilize muted or aged colors within the glaze, I continue to work with the imagery of pots to actualize the bits and parts that make up an individual. The forms are still misshapen and not only represent the impact of history and time, but also show how humans influence their own image. And the flowers and candles speak to parts that cannot be controlled, whether it is the memories of others have of you or the inevitability of a life coming to an end. And finally, I wanted to move past the representation of a physical object or space and try to capture the image of a memory. Much like the table, I see memory as something that consists in the past, present, and future, as it is something that is continually changing, being built up as new experiences are had and tumbling down as things are forgotten. This piece is called my Makumbi, or welcoming fire. It is my take on the tradition of remembering past loved ones. From the beginning, I was interested in family dynamics because I wanted to understand my family after the death of a parent. How did that change us? This piece focused on a more individual sense of change and impact, the idea of memory and remembering someone who has died and how those moments shift and change with time. How some memories stay strong and bright while others start to slip away. My final piece is a triptych called Experiencing, Remembering, Forgetting. It is a construction of the many layers and density of memory. For me, it is centered around an individual, but maybe it reminds you of something or someone else. Thank you.
Perfect timing, 5 minutes. Magda, would you like to comment?
Presentation, Madison. Very good presentation. I am thinking that the thing that I want to bring your attention to it is the relation of the object and the pedestal. I am thinking that your pedestals, as they are presenting in this particular image, are not yet helping or of reinforcing the aesthetic and visual message that you want to send. And I think that you need to work in that. You need to drop those cumbersome boxes and find out what is the material and what is the object or what combination of material objects really enter in conversation with this accumulation of destruction and ruin. Because what you're looking here is the ruin of the family heirloom in a way. The only thing that I am missing, the other thing that I am proposing is, what about using real family heirloom? You know, somebody passed away, well, let me not say that, but somebody is ready to get rid of the entire china, and then you take that in and insert it with what you're looking for. Any thrift shop is full of that. Why? I am a thinker. Quickly, I say this very quickly. We are in a post-industrial society. We have too much of everything. We produce too much carbon in the anything that could be taken, that is already there and could be repositioned, reconsidered, restructured, repair, whatever you want to go with there is very valuable. So that is a, thrift shop, a store for you should be like a fortune cookie places. I am removing the pedestal right now and they look so much incredible, amazing. They are something of ethereality and majesty on this accumulation together. And then this box in the bottom kind of take the breath away.
Madison, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So as a gallery worker, I saw you sort of assembling some of the pieces from sort of a cart where there was like the cups, the plates, the bowls sort of individually, and you were sort of constructing them. So I was wondering how much of that process is sort of an impromptu process in the space, or whether you know how these fit together. Are they meant to fit together really specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it kind of hints to some of the other ideas of finding objects versus making objects. And the table piece, I guess I can go back to that. Everything is individual, and then the structure is built so I can wire on each piece. And that's all like intuitive. So I made all the pieces individually, and then intuitively just kind of started building, and mainly trying to make sure that there's no gaps and that everything kind of fits in. And it's kind of this idea of piling. The other objects, like my lanterns, for example, those are built after I throw them, and then they are attached together. So that's a really, it's kind of a symbiotic, I guess, relationship. So as I'm building up, I'm kind of thinking, well, what piece would fit well there? And then I shape each pot to fit on top of the other one as they get taller.
A quick question from me too, if you don't mind. I'm an unreconstructed historian of Western art. And because of that, when I look at your work, it's really hard for me not to see an incredibly rich, long tradition of still life, and in particularly still life painting. And I understand you're referencing, your craft and pots and so on and so forth. But I wonder if you're doing this also a little bit in dialogue with the history of art, and Western art in particular.
Yeah, actually, a really big source of mine is old Dutch paintings. The name's leaving my brain right now because I'm a little nervous. But yeah, so the old Dutch paintings where you see the still lifes and there's flowers everywhere, and that kind of idea of flowers being at bloom versus kind of decaying, and all that symbolism that goes along with that. The idea of you have to, you're going to die, you have your mortality, and that kind of sense of, for them, they were saying live a life that follows by, religious law. For me, it's more of this, idea of cherishing and remembering and valuing those experiences. But yeah, there's a lot of that kind of history influencing the pieces.
That's exactly what I saw. So thank you for validating what I saw. Good work.
Thank you.
Yes, good work. We've run out of time. Thank you so much. Nice dialogue there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Danielle O'Malley, and thank you very much for joining my peers and I tonight for our art talks. Why is that? I make large-scale sculptures that are symbolic of my concern for our planet's declining health. I grew up in a rural environment where I learned to love and respect the natural world from an early age. As an adult, it saddens me to see how our planet has been misused and abused. My work is heavily influenced by things that I see in my daily life, whether it's the monumental landscape that I experience when I'm back home in Montana, or if it's the debris that I see from the ocean washing up on the shorelines in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and New Bedford. Clay is a malleable material that can be shaped into personalized form. There's 3 types of clay: earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain. And I choose to use earthenware because of its warm, inviting color, its workability, and its low firing temperature. My work is organized into 2 distinct categories. The first category is used to show that our ecological imbalance. The second category offers solutions for living resourcefully. For example, these water filters. These pieces are built out of earthenware, which has a high porosity rate, and that allows toxins and bacteria to be filtered through the clay itself. So these particular vessels have the ability to be used to actually filter out water, and they're a metaphor for our dire need for clean resources. I hand-build engaging sensual forms that are indicative of domestic, utilitarian, and industrial objects that are found in my landscape. I look to buoys, vessels, life preservers, and traps. These forms seem as if they're pregnant with the breath of air, soft like the comfort of a blanket, and curvy like the landscape. In addition to using my clay earthen material, I'm also committed to repurposing found waste material. I source these materials from my local area, whether it's like thrift stores or on my ocean walks and picking things up off the beach. I also harvest plants that are within my local region too, and process them into paper. I use a variety of different types of materials within my work, very similar to artists from the Art Povera movement. My hand-built work is made from the repetition of pinching, adding coils, and paddling the clay into curvaceous forms. This process is physically exerting, laboriously intensive, and extremely rewarding. The appearance of buoyancy is instrumental in not only underscoring the concepts of warning and concern, but it's also effective in making my sculptures more enticing for the viewer. I choose to work with buoys because they're a symbol of warning. In this case, I'm warning my viewers about our hazardous environmental situation. I display these buoyant flotation forms in a variety of manners. Some of them restrict space, some of them protrude into it, and others are stacked as if they're waiting for their intent purpose. My most recent work, Cage, depicts a grid and is representative of how we're all living in our own filth. It's a call for people to be more respectful of the natural world. The healthier that the planet is, the healthier that we are. In conclusion, I use my artwork to highlight the misuse and abuse that we're inflicting upon the natural world. I hope that my passion for making, my love for the earth, and my delight in observing the world around me, in combination with my large-scale sculptures and installations, will encourage people to join me in reconsidering our daily routines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice. Could I ask you, Molly, Daniela, what is the material of the last piece that you presented?
This one here?
Mm-hmm.
So this is earthenware, and then it's covered in adobe clay, sodium silicate, iron rust, and coffee stain.
Right. Right. So, I mean, I am trying to follow, you seems very conscious and very well-informed and consequent with the idea of caring for the environment and working alongside recycling and recovering material. That is something that I'm welcoming, and I am pushing anybody that is around and about to try to do that, because I think that is important in our time to think of that without taking away the possibility, of course, of creating with any other material that people does. I thinking that the utilitarian aspect of the basis that could be filtered for water could have an entire kind of investigation of it on their own, an application in some way, in many ways. One of my questions for you would be is, where do you see it? What is the destiny of your work? Where do you see your work being more efficient?
That's a good question. So as far as like trajectory of like professional practices, I'm interested in like working alongside like museums. So like museum showcase and stuff like that. But I'm also highly aware that it's a very curated experience. It's only a certain amount of people see it. So there's like also like, how do I get it out into the public?
So I know that we have a limited time, but I want to be a devil's advocate here. So there is a town who have very serious difficulty for clean water. Do your vessels could be of help in the house of the family which could not drink the water coming from the service of the town? That is, we could talk about that tomorrow, but I am thinking that your generation, the entire generation, need to think of the future of art and the application where art could exist besides Gagosian Gallery and or the Tiara of that realm. No say that that's not great, we want that, but what else is possible? So I see for what you presented tonight, a missing potentiality and a missing possibilities in what you're doing and what you are researching that is valuable at the same time that you are exhibiting in one of the big galleries when you get there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rebecca, did you want to make a comment? You have
I don't know how we're doing for time, but Danielle, perhaps you might want to say 2 sentences about your investigation of the Berkeley Pit Superfund site, just to maybe elaborate a little bit more about how your work is operating beyond the gallery space.
Thank you. Yeah, just like a quick summary of that. So I mentioned that I live in 2 areas. So Montana is my home state, and then Massachusetts is where I live during the academic year. So in these locations, I have the unique position to be living next to 2 Superfund sites. So here we're next to like the Buzzards Bay Superfund site, and then in Montana, I'm really close to the Berkeley Pit, which is a former copper mine that's partially still in operation, but basically it's reaching a level where people are becoming concerned that the toxic waters are going to start seeping into the local water table. So these particular water filters were really inspired by my research with the Berkeley Pit and thinking about just like, what are ways that we can, like, how can we make this a better situation? How can we be like proactive and start taking care of like what's around us?
And they replicate a water filtering system that you saw there that you're critiquing through this work, is my understanding, right?
So they're also kind of thinking about like there's a group called Potters for Peace, and they go around and they actually make like water filters in areas that clean water isn't like available readily. So thinking about like, what if those 2 ideas were connected? So like these water filters and then like the Superfund site.
Well, thank you. We're going to move on to Valerie now.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Valerie Rami and I work in ceramics. I am a hand builder and a sculptor. My work is autobiographical. I was born in India, I grew up in North Dakota, and I've always been interested in the self, our minds, our brains, our emotions, and generally how we move through life. I studied psychology in college, so my studio practice is really a combination of these interests and experiences. I create self-sufficient entities that are inspired by the ambiguous, hidden, private spaces of the queer migrant identity. Through my making, I aim to illustrate my personal understanding of psychology, of identity, of culture in a visually abstract but physically concrete way, while also showcasing the complexity of such identities through form and in a way that is authentic to my person. I research identity politics to understand the societal positions of marginalized identities and develop my own critical take on how to exist within that marginality. My work is imbibed by the content and it seeks to uphold these experiences. It becomes a voice which seeks to educate about the complexities, the beauty, and the nuances of these identities and how they fail to fit into normative places in the majority, but do so contently and on their own terms. The actual forms themselves are not easily legible. They don't look entirely unfamiliar, but they are strangely unique. Not every surface, plane, or joint is visible, and the physicality of moving around to see the inside of the vessels charges the space between the piece and the viewer, thus forcing the viewer to exist in a dimension which is not about what the viewer has to say about the piece, but what the piece doesn't say to the viewer. I hand build all of my pieces, mainly using the coiling and pinching technique. I build the bottom half of the pieces upside down and then flip them right side up and continue to build up. My process isn't really a linear process. I will sometimes take a couple steps forward only to take several steps back and break what I've just made in order to change it slightly. So the building process is pretty intuitive. I do have sort of a sketch of how I want it to look in my head, but it doesn't always follow that. I use a dark, rich stoneware for my pieces. The clay is really dense, so it holds prints well. The darkness of the clay is really the vehicle that carries the qualities of privacy and quietness and austerity that's important to the work. The combination of the dark clay and the way that I build these forms and the gestures of these forms all result in shadows and pockets of space that may or may not be visible to the viewer depending on where you're standing, how close you're standing, and where the light is hitting. Through this informed making, I stake a place in the art historical narratives of minority identities and exhibit the bold presentation of those just outside the fringes of society in a way that is authentically but deliberately exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Very, your words about your practice seems very consistent. That is a kind of a direct description of your intention, your methodology, your mind space, and the product that result of it. Self-sustain, kind of singular products in a way and projects. I am curious about your sources of influence. I see, and this is going to sound maybe completely rare for you, but I see a sort of a west, northwest, sub-Sahara African architecture upside down in your work, and the way that the clay, the structuring the clay, and a kind of a form, the morphing of form, and it is built up. So I could see both the scale, the human scale that this work have, but also a more monumental scale as well. It's almost like, is this going to be built 20 times the size? They are balanced, they are structurally fixed to do so. So in any case, that is something to think about. They are very idiosyncratic in a way, and the way that you express yourself about your work is very idiosyncratic, because you don't have a space for doubt. You are telling us exactly what you want, how it's going to be, and where it's going with that. And that is is very peculiar and in a way intriguing as well. So my question is, what are the sources? And in general, I need to confess, now that I am seeing the second, nobody mad at me there, please. But I am not excited about the pedestals. I think that the solution with the pedestal create interruption to observing the work, and also interruption now that I see the work of the previous artists behind the Iranian artists here. I think those pedestals need to be rethinking as all completely, because it in some way. But I wonder, what would be all these 5 figures in a circular platform, lower in the floor, close to the same temperature and the same feeling of that floor. And then we need to go and look at them from the top and bend ourselves to look at to the side. What would be that in a way? And I think that this is a good argument about the power of space complete the work.
Magda, this is curious. This is Jim, one of Val's teachers. Curiously, Valerie, your undergrad work was on such a scale, it didn't really use the pedestal. And I think Magda brings up an interesting point that these have gotten quite a bit more complicated in their form, and they really do refer to Adobe architecture. But they're much more objects, and before they really existed on the floor a lot more, and were much larger in scale. Can you speak to the scale issue?
Sure. First, thank you so much for your comments. I would love to talk more about my sources and the installation tomorrow. That'd be great. Yeah, the scale is, I think, Jim, you're right. It's the scale is actually somewhat the same. If I think about, my senior show, 4 years ago, the scale is similar, but it's just the way that I'm using the scale. And with the height of the pedestals and the height of the pieces, it was more about curating how the scale is experienced, which I didn't do before. With this installation, these heights are curated, and it's very much about where do you have access, how do you have access to each individual piece, and I think that sort of nuanced consideration just wasn't there before. So that's sort of where the height came from. But as far as a large scale, the things that I'm trying to do with the clay, sort of restricting access, playing with access, making it inviting but not necessarily legible. The scale does help a lot with that. And the smaller pieces, they're still intriguing, but there's something about the big piece in the middle and the tall one that I think those just hit the nail on a hammer a little more than the smaller ones.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm an MFA candidate in graphic design. My thesis work involves visualizing 2 pieces of piano music by 2 composers, Scriabin and Shostakovich. I'm also a musician. I did one of my undergrad degrees in piano performance, and so I've always been interested in the relationships between music and design, so I decided to do my thesis on it. This is a poster I made about a series of 24 preludes and fugues by the composer Shostakovich. Fugue structures consist of a melodic line that is played starting at several different pitches, so it sounds like different voices. And these voices are played simultaneously and interwoven throughout the whole piece. So I'll play a short clip for my performance of number 15 so you can get an idea. So with this fugue, there's this intensity and brightness and complexity that I wanted to convey in the poster through the use of colors, layers, and woven lines and shapes. This poster I made about a sonata by Scriabin. Scriabin believed that combining his music with other stimuli would enhance the experience of expressiveness, and he was especially interested in color. He wrote, through music and color, with the aid of perfume, the human mind can be lifted outside or above merely physical sensations into the region of purely abstract ecstasy and intellectual speculation. So with that in mind, I created an image for each phrase or short musical idea in the music. And my goal was to visually communicate the different rhythms, harmonies, melodies, moods, characters of each phrase through color, composition, and type. I made them by combining photography, painting, and text. So then I designed them into a book form, and I designed the structure of the book to reflect the structure of the music. So for example, when there were long pauses in the music, I would lay out a blank spread like this, so that way the reader will experience a pause too. Here are some more spreads. Part of what musicians do, besides playing all the notes that the composer wrote, is to decide how they want to interpret the piece and what choices to make in order to play musically or expressively or with color, as musicians will say. And pianists will do this by pushing and pulling the tempo or the speed and in certain places, or changing volume, the dynamics, and doing different articulations like accented notes versus smooth notes. And all of this creates different characters in the music. And it's always exciting to hear how different musicians will play the same piece in different ways, depending on how they interpret it. So these are my interpretations for the music. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
I am mute. Thank you, Cindy. Good work, good presentation. I was seeing the first image totally blue, and I was thinking it was me because I am since 4 a.m. working, but I know that later you fix it. I am thinking about two things. It's good, it's a good book, it's a good translation, or maybe better, conversation between music, composition, and visual expression. I am thinking, however, there is a space for more. There is a space to push it. I was thinking, I am seeing what you're doing with text, what you're doing with photograph, what you're doing with painting, and how do you try with the layering of this tree and using the opportunity of this tree language, creating something which would be a beautiful object, which is the book. And I am sure that that book is exquisite. I don't see it in the flesh, but it could be exquisite. But I want to invite you to get out of the book and go into the space and make people letters, make people be in vocals, make an opera. I'm sorry, nobody told me what are the parameters, what I need to say here. They told me come and critique. So, but I was thinking, this is what you need next. You want to turn exactly this proposition of it was Shostakovich or I forgot the composer, but who was the composer that you departing from the first?
Shostakovich.
So make an opera. this is so perfect for a little opera. Each page could be a character, as you have it. Wrap people in the page. Make 10 people, letter R, B, L, C, put it in a stage. Put it in that dynamic of this level of the layer of voices and the cacophony of that you're doing with the double interpretation in the piano. Make it into sonic sculptural space. That is when visualizing music come completed. When it become a physical sonic space different than the acoustic one that we have been always training, because music always was to be here and to travel and to occupy a space. But now you are making that visualization, not just the orchestra playing. It includes this other language of graphic. I can't wait to see that. And I wanted to mention to you quickly, go back to the archive and do Café Voltaire, first piece of the Dada people, all dressed like crazy people, hitting, singing, crazy in the piano, because have vitality that is still meaningful today. And check it out, Lulu, William Kentridge. I suppose that you already saw it.
I'll look that up, yeah.
Had you seen Lulu, William Kentridge, opera Lulu? Please write that down, Lulu, William, and because you are ready to bring that out. It could be two people, the duet with this graphic, with this, whatever you think it, but make it sonic, physical space of visualizing music.
Okay, great, thank you. Those are great comments. Thank you.
They pay me for that.
Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment about? We have a question from Laura Franz. I'm interested in where the text comes from for your typographic compositions. How did you decide what words to use?
So in the book, I wrote about the piece, playing it from my perspective. So I just wrote about some of the challenges or what the piece, what was going on in the music theory. So I just wrote a bunch of things about it. And then I took that text and photographed it. I printed it in different sizes and on transparent film and then photographed it. And then that's how I made the images.
Very nice, Cindy. Next up, all the way from Vietnam, we have Ben presenting to us.
So hi everyone, my name is Bing and my major is graphic design, and the theme I chose for all my artwork is home, because when I was living in the US, I realized the connection between me and homeland has become stronger. Through artistic perspective, I want to define the picture of my homeland from two points of view. The first represents the emotion and memories of my life in Hanoi. The second signifies how those memories and emotion change while I experience a new life in the US. So there are three visual forms I have used to convey my messages: posters, book design, and video. Firstly, about poster, I did a lot of different posters in many different aspects of home to understand more deeply about where I belong to. Here are four of my most favorite works I did during 2 years studying at UMass Dartmouth. First one, you can see the series of Vietnam travel poster. In this series, I want to bring an introduction about Vietnam, Vietnamese people, and beautiful landscape to viewers who has not known much about my country. And I try to apply the photo typo relation to expressing my homeland. Mainly, I transformed the word Vietnam into many different text forms to that each type can match the corresponding picture theme in a single poster based on one of four relations between photo and text, such as separation, fusion, fragmentation and inversion. The next one is a series of posters named The Early Summer Rain. The Early Summer Rain is an old song I wrote for 4 years ago to reserve personal emotion and memories after the first breakup. And but also the inspiration for my series of my photographic poster about Hanoi through the process of creating a one-line drawing style and combining the song lyric with my Hanoi photo. I desire to show a new view angle about Hanoi intimately and individually. And the next piece, one out of the series of political posters which reflect hard issues I have seen, heard, and felt during the pandemic over the world. And the last one in the series of photographic poster, I visualize how I imagine these famous places in Hanoi when I first heard their names as a child. For example, here is the building named Shop George. At first, I thought it had a shop shape, but its reality it did not look like its name. Um, about the second format of my work, book design, I desire to turn meaningful memories and unforgettable experiences I got from 2 years studying in the US into a diary book where I could look back on them. I also wanted to express the great love for my root that has become more vital for me every day in my life away from home so far. And the book not only reflects my spiritual world, but it also clear evidence of my development of collage style and the maturity of my artistic voice as well. My artworks on every page are an outcome of my multiple techniques applied to my photos, such as image cutting, layering, visual balancing, and coloring. So this project such a good chance for me to challenge my creative at most and open a unique perspective of experiencing art for audiences. Among collage pages, the diary also alternatively shows my best artworks from my 2 year master degree at UMass Dartmouth. So here are a few of books spreads. And besides poster and book design, videos are also my favorite vehicle to raise my artistic voice. I love traveling and recording every moment I catch in a daily life. Video help me so much in this aspect. Here is the Hanoi video going with the classic instrument for recording the city tour and evoking the unique piece, even though the pandemic has still been happening toughly. So I play it. I think because of the time limits of this presentation, so I can now show full video, but I can put the YouTube link later, so you can watch it later. Yeah, thank you for watching.
Thank you.
could you give us a link to the video?
Yeah, because at first I upload this video on my Facebook account. So yeah, I will upload it on YouTube.
Do you have?
We have some of Fran's videos on the video on our website. I'll post the link.
All right.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
So being my first question is, it sounds like a very beautiful project and well sold and well realized. My question is this book just a coffee table book, or do you plan to have it in a present online as well?
So about the first question, so this book now is like a virtual digital book, and later I will print out it.
Yeah.
It's now a physical one, but it's hard for me to send it to every teacher and student here. So I think I just keep it like my own stuff.
But I love the fact that it's a virtual book, and at the same time, at some point, could become an object, and could have this both life and both existence in a way. I need to say that it seems poignant to start seeing that's end of the short part of the video that you presented, because it almost, because the time in which we are seeing this work is almost capture a bygone era, no? After a year of separation and isolation, of a lack of crowd and all of that, to see a moment, it has a very strong sense of something very precious in the path. So good work, working, and let's see, make a film and be busy in the cloud.
Yeah. So thank you for your comment, and yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ben. We have our last presenter, Emma.
So varied clarity is an index to the materiality of language and the magic of labor. This first image lists the many materials used. In a gallery, it's an identifying label. If this were a book, it would be the colophon. These are the materials and products of thinking in process. I regard all products of my labor, textual and material, as the articulation of knowledge, as language. The work comes together in this installation, or to borrow a phrase from Walter Benjamin, a constellation. These ideas are only momentarily gathered here so that we may take them in, but ideas are ongoing. They interrelate and grow as they are thought, spoken, discussed, and acted on. A book is a constellation of words, an exhibition, a constellation of creative works, and this is a bit of both. I show composed works and elements of the processes used to make them. They are displayed on wooden shelves made from reclaimed lumber from former textile mills in New Bedford. I think of it as a choose your own adventure. You might take in color, texture, or graphic form. You might read just the images, or you can read further in the poems or in the index pages that are collaged of the sources, places, and poems I called on in my research. So my garden was the initial site of research for this project. Last spring, losing access to our studios, I started a garden of plants for paper fibers and for dye. This is Navajo green thread, which I harvested every day for months, but in return could make the most vibrant oranges. Straw flowers bloom and already feel like paper and shine like silk. I grew them just for beauty. Otherwise, I dried all my plants to prepare for the winter work of processing. So you see flax here, used for paper and for linen cloth, and thread for weaving being dyed in the sun. I did all my dyeing just with plants and with time, letting everything sit and slowly take on color. The dye baths would then be recycled into pure pigments, and I mixed those with oils to make my printmaking inks. So I use traditional methods for paper making here with an Eastern style paper frame out underneath the peach tree. And if you fast forward through many months of designing and processing and making, I arrived at varied clarity. And so my installation work maybe is not, the ideas here are maybe not fully clear, but a variation I could offer on clarity. So here you see the metal letter E that I use to watermark all the sheets of paper. And in the weaving, the same cotton threads that were being dyed in the greenhouse, and they're woven with silk that is also from former textile mills in New Bedford. So each piece or panel or page has its own subtle theme and color palette, and each has a corresponding index page that lays on the wooden shelf below. But these ideas can have many understandings. There's no rigidity to this index. The organizational system isn't apparent, but it's yours to make if you wish. So this project was a lesson for me in varied clarity. I learned from my homemade inks that they wouldn't always give me a clean impression, and from my large sheets of paper that they would crinkle as much as they wanted to, and I didn't always have control. And in this panel, repeating the images here in different variations of inking and paper, we see a varied clarity, and we see that material has a life of its own. And I would offer that language does too. And the work is in finding the words for it. And in this poem, I have a name for it. In the morning, I searched for it, its language. My first few breaths, plus movement, some music, come out as small jokes, just fragments. I slip, sound British, never quite knowing why and what makes humor delicious. Its sounds, inflections, for what else are predilections until articulated? What are words until they're tasted? Thank you so much.
Delicious, absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
Completely edible, completely delicious.
You could eat it probably, yes.
I'm most certain that what is missing here, you know, I just coming out to do a keynote speech about senses. This is so sensorial. This is such an stimulation of every possibility in the senses in a very language-based, almost in tautology, language onto language of labor.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Thank you so
All
much.
that I want to see is more. And I want to see what is next. And I want to see, but very, very good. Very good.
And the gallery space actually does smell a little bit grassy. There are some plants that made their way into the gallery. So
now I never let people rest. So this is a very strong conceptual work. Is a very poetical work. I would say that the entire installation is itself a poem, let's say. A poem of labor, a poem of methodology, a poem of also simple living. There's something here that is so essential about the very American terminology, do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
No, and then I just want to challenge about this is so complete. This is so complete. This is so finished in what it is. That then what is next? I imagine that you're going to establish a farm with a residence for artists and neighbors and people who come and discover how is to turn a simple question of the day in an entire process. So this is when I see, I am very interested, and I'm sharing that with the entire group, in the idea of artist as social designer. You are proposing a small piece of paradise, find purpose in simplicity. How could you spread that in solidarity? How could you become a vehicle, a conduit of that beautiful gesture of love and spread the virus of love?
Absolutely. I would just say quickly that I've enjoyed reading a lot about the idea of a garden as a commons and the way that it's a gathering place. And this past summer, it was very much that for me. So there is certainly a future to this work. And I think for all my peers as well for their work. And that's a really exciting place, I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Magdalena and Emma. I want to do a short shout out here. Ryan, Paulina, Taylor, Sabnam, Sungji, Madison, Danielle, Valerie, Cindy, Ben, and Emma. Thank you for your incredible efforts that came to fruition tonight in your thesis show and in your discussions with our big community here. I want to not only paraphrase, but use our distinguished art historian Anna Dempsey. She says, "Congratulations to all. Your presentations were wonderful. Your work has matured and developed since I first met you in your first semester." And that's really talks about the travel you have all made in these 2 and 3 years through the program. Incredible diversity in the show that really represents your individuality. And Magdalena, welcome. And really great off the cuff, you know, not having seen the work, but just seeing it. Thank you for your comments. And I know the students are really excited about discussions tomorrow with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I am very excited to see all of you. It's a privilege to see where you are as upcoming young artists. And it's definitely a very robust program for what I have seen tonight. So far, I congratulate all of you and your professors and everybody involved in the program. And it's my privilege, and sorry that I have been so busy that my time is so constrained, but I really appreciate, and it's a great, great pleasure to see the work tonight. I live inspired and spirited with this cohort of young artists coming out of Dartmouth. So thank you for inviting me.
And many thanks to Vieira Levitt for incredible hard work and putting together the show, as well as your assistant, Rosie, and Spencer.
Yeah, you did it. You did it after this year. You still kept working. You know, it's incredible for me to see what artists do. Like in the year of crisis and complete insecurity and uncertainty, what you do is you do your art. And it's fragile, but it's strong, it's powerful, and it's amazing for me to watch and get inspired by, and also kind of help me understand this world that is being upside down for such a long time now. So thank you for doing that. Thank you. And